My name is Nosa Tukura. I serve as the Executive Coordinator for the African Women in Missions Network, and I also coordinate the Children in Missions Network for the Movement for African National Initiatives. So this evening we'll be talking about children in missions. And just a simple question. When Jesus gave the command to the disciples to go and make disciples of all nations, were children a part of that mandate? In this presentation, I'm going to take a two-pronged approach in looking at this issue. We will look at children as targets of mission, and we'll also look at children as partners of mission. In the Lausanne discussion paper titled, "There Are No Unreached Children," the argument is made that children are everywhere, and therefore we don't have to go searching for them. And I quote from that paper, "Children are no remote or obscure people group. The church today may not be looking for children, but they wouldn't have to look far to find them. They are found in all countries, in all socioeconomic categories, and among people of all cultures. They are in all communities, in families, in schools, in markets, in playgrounds, in streets. They are in areas not easily accessible to the gospel. They are in marginalized subcultures where you have children with special needs. They are in prison, homeless, and displaced. They are also in high-risk situations where conditions increase the likelihood that they may not have the opportunity to hear the gospel because they're in bonded slave labor or they are trafficked. They are also in resistant circumstances, children who have been harmed or neglected by those responsible or representing the Christian faith." So you have children everywhere. And that's the end of the quote from that discussion paper. The sad reality, however, is that most of our missions effort either overlooks them or uses them as a bait to get their parents who are considered to be more important. And this is very similar in attitude to the disciples of Jesus, who felt that the master had so many important things to do than laying his hands on children. But it's very instructive that Jesus rebuked them strongly, and he ordered that children should not be stopped from coming to him. In many of his teachings, Jesus used children as examples. For example, he said, "Unless we are like little children, we will not enter the kingdom." When asked who is the greatest, he placed a child in their midst in Matthew 18, 1-5. He also said, "If anyone misleads a child, it will be better that he was not born, but have a millstone tied to his neck." In Matthew 18, the same Matthew 18, verse 6-7. He admonished us to not despise any of these little ones in Matthew 18:10. So we see that God, all through scriptures, has demonstrated that he's a God of all generations. He is referred to as the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of our forefathers. Psalm 78, verse 3-7 tells us that his desire is that one generation will tell the other generation of his works. And in Deuteronomy 6, verse 1-19, God commanded the children of Israel to raise their children and grandchildren to know him and follow his ways. Jesus, through his life and teachings, demonstrated the importance and high premium God places on children. There are more than 1,500 references to children and childhood, including orphans, parenting, and training. That the discussion paper I mentioned earlier, "There Are No Unreached Children," covers a lot of this information I'm sharing with you. Now, what does this mean for the church in Africa? Let's bring it home. The children of Africa. Africa is richly blessed with children. We are called the youngest continent because about 41% of our population is more than is under the age of 15 years. Actually, a little more than 40%. For my country, Nigeria, we're about 44%. Ghana also hovers around that. So it is estimated that Africa's population will rise from 1.2 billion, that was our population in 2010, to 2.4 billion by the year 2050. And right now, the statistics for this year show that we're about 1.3 billion people. Children are very important to the church in Africa because they are the church of the now, not of the future. I get very upset when people say children are the church of the future. They are here right now. We can't wish them away. And a wise investor always considers very seriously where she or he will make the greatest profit. The high population of the children, which is more than 41%, compared to the older population of those 65 years and above, which are an average of about 3%, makes it imperative for the church in Africa and its agencies to turn their full attention to the ministry to children. Unfortunately, this lack of prioritizing ministry to and with children is having a great negative effect on our church and mission strategies. These children become young people who have grown up without knowing the Lord. They don't have the knowledge and the fear of the Lord. And they terrorize their families, terrorize their communities and the nations. Just take a look at the situation we have on our continent today. Then we also lose the giftings and contributions that they are intended to bring to the building of the church and the development of society. Africa is called the youngest continent. For those same reasons I just explained. We have the highest population in terms of percentage of all the continents in the world of people under 15 years of age. I was at a meeting in 2015, Ethne, which is focused on unreached peoples. And Justin Long, a well-known, respected researcher, gave some statistics. Now, if you imagine the world just split into three parts. You have the A world, which represents the unreached world, and then you have the B world, which represents the ones who are, so you have the A world at the top, you have the B world at the middle part, and you have the C world at the bottom circle, just split like an orange into three, where the C world is the Christianized world. And he gave us some very interesting statistics where yearly, about 15 million people convert from the B world to the C world. But the sad news is that about 12 million also defect. So while we're gaining 15 million converts, 12 million are exiting. And then from the A world, which is the world of the unreached, about 58 million people hear the gospel for the first time annually. And then he said something which really stood out for me at that meeting. He said, the population rate is outstripping our best efforts to reach the least reached. And according to Justin, babies are the problem. And when he said that, a light bulb went off in my head. I believe it's a clarion call for the church. That is for all of us who are members of the body of Christ to take seriously the ministry to and with children. Our best efforts, whatever it is we are doing to reach the unreached, the statistics just seem like nothing is changing because of the population rate. So many babies are born yearly. In fact, according to that statistics, 138 million people, babies are born annually. And going by that statistics, 45 plus million of those babies are born to parents who are in the Christian world, and then 93 million plus are born to non-Christians from the A world. That's huge. Unfortunately, the church still thinks that ministry to children is for a select group of people who are Sunday school teachers. It's much bigger than that. It's a clarion call that all of us need to take this seriously. Now imagine if the 45 million children born to those Christian parents in the sea world are discipled to be obedient followers of Jesus who make disciples. Then they can be prepared to reach the children of the A world by praying, by evangelizing, and by mobilizing other children to be part of God's mission. It's not all gloom and doom. By 2050, Africa will be home to more than 1 billion Christians. We will have the largest number of evangelical Christians globally. And this has huge implications. Number one, by 2050, I will be in my 80s. And my granddaughter, who is 2 years old now, will be 32 years. So imagine if I am able to invest into this 2-year-old as she is, she will be an active player in that expected 2050, where the population of evangelical Christians in Africa would explode. So this puts a huge responsibility on us, the present church, to prepare the children who will lead this movement now and in the future. I like this quote. It's from the We Family Ministry. And it says, if tomorrow's world of unreached people were waiting for our kids, would our kids have a heart to reach them based on what we are giving them? It's a question we all need to ponder on. What are we giving our children to prepare them to be the church of the now and the church of the future? We need to go beyond the traditional understanding of children's ministry as a forum to raise good Christian boys and girls who love the Lord, to a more holistic biblical understanding that God is calling these boys and girls to join him on his mission to bring redemption and transformation to all of mankind. And he's not waiting for them to grow up first. He wants to engage with them right now. And we have several biblical examples, such as the stories about Samuel, Naaman's slave girl, that show us that God can and does use children. So the question is, how can we raise children to become partners in mission? Remember I said we are using a two-pronged approach. The first one, we talked about children as targets of mission. And the second, children as partners in mission. So how can we raise these children to become partners in mission? I think the first thing we need to do is to return to God's original command in Deuteronomy chapter 6 and repeated for emphasis in Deuteronomy chapter 11, that recognizes that the primary place of discipleship of children is the home, not the church or the Christian school, good as they may be. The primary place of discipleship is the home. So Christian families are the primary discipleship centers of the church. They are both the place and means for raising the next generation of disciples, families, and leaders. When families get it right, the church will be right. The home is the best place to raise missions-minded children. So how can we raise children to become partners in missions? By mobilizing Christian families to be part of God's mission as families, not as individuals. The whole family should be on mission with God, not just the parents or the children through Sunday school. Everybody has a role and they have a part to play in that. And I'm going to share some stories with you shortly. I want to tell you the story of Hope Smith, a 9-year-old girl who in 1997 had an assignment to research on any country of the world. And somehow she chose to research about the country of Mongolia. She lived in the US. And as Hope began to read about Mongolia, her heart was broken. She found out that in Mongolia they had just about 5 Christians. And Mongolians worshipped idols in their tents, in their huts. They didn't know God. They had more idols than they had Bibles. And so she began to pray for Mongolia. Every day, Hope began to pray for Mongolia. She began to pray that God will cause the people of Mongolia to know Jesus. She began to pray that the people of Mongolia will become Christians, that they will have Bibles. And every day for 2 years, Hope began to pray for these people. And then one day, she came across an open newspaper on the countertop in her kitchen, on the table in her kitchen. And she read about Mongolia. They now had about 500 Christians in Mongolia. There were Bibles in Mongolia. A child, a 9-year-old who prayed for 2 years every day for Mongolia, had been used by God to bring about change in that situation. Interestingly, the largest cathedral in Mongolia was called Hope Cathedral. Do you think it was just coincidence that it was named Hope? And this child's name, the child who had been praying every day for 2 years, is also called Hope. Here's another story of a family. The children asked them, "Daddy and Mommy, why did you bring us here?" And this is their story. So it was that we arrived at our new church planting station. They were called of God and sent by their mission organization to work among the Southern African Unreached group. And so they arrived at their mission station at about 10 p.m. And the children woke up and they heard the sounds of the baboons, and they chased off the beasts and began to feed on the mangoes themselves. And then the parents showed up, and then the children, began to ask, as is normal with children, "Why did you bring us here?" And the parents told the children, "God brought us here, and we must find a way to serve God here." Now, here's the game plan. Daddy will reach the men of this land, Mommy will reach the women of this land, and who do you think will reach the children? And the kids, "Oh, we, of course." 9 months later, a vibrant church had been planted. Most of the members were young adults brought to the church by those same questioning missionary children. So God does use children. I was told the story of a 14-year-old boy who showed up in a leaders' meeting. And everybody was like, what's he doing here? 14-year-old. And then during the break, somebody chatted him up. "So how are you doing? What do you do? Are you here with your parents?" He said, "No, I'm here." And they said, "Oh, really? What do you do?" He said, "Well, I haven't done much for the Lord. I've only just planted about 100 churches." Wow, a 14-year-old boy. I will also tell you the story of Alexandra, an 8-year-old girl who understood, because her parents, her family had taught her and exposed her to learn to listen to God. And she had some money. And she felt God was asking her to save her money. And she went to her mom and said she would like to put aside some money. So she had a piggy bank and she would save money. And then one day she went to the mom and said, "Mom, the Lord is asking me to give this money to somebody." And the mom said, "Oh, okay. Just walk as the Lord leads you." And so Alexandra, on that Sunday morning in church, her former Sunday school teacher came in Alexandra walked up to her with the money, the pennies she had been able to save, wrapped in a piece of cloth, and went and handed it over to her and said, "The Lord asked me to give this to you." Now, when the teacher saw this, she broke down in tears. Unknown to Alexandra, the teacher had been struggling with a call to missions. And she was struggling with how will she be taken care of if she leaves her paid job to go into this mission work. And the Lord used the 8-year-old Alexandra to show her that he's capable of taking care of her. I could go on and on and on. But I'll share with you the story of a 7-year-old boy who, when he prayed, felt the Lord was calling him to China. Use a 7-year-old, how can the Lord call a 7-year-old to missions? He felt the Lord was calling him to China, and then he shared with his parents. And so as the parents prayed along, one day the mother said to him, "Now, if the Lord is calling you to China, don't you think we should learn Mandarin?" And so she enrolled the 7-year-old son and herself in a Mandarin school. And then the father also began to inquire to see if there was any opportunity for global workers in China. Today, that whole family has moved to China because a 7-year-old heard the call of God. In the Bible, you would have come across the story of King Josiah. He was just 8 years old. And God used him to turn the heart of the nation of Israel back to God. So I ask the question again, how can we help our children learn that they are called to be partners in God's mission? We can do that by engaging with them. Sometimes people feel, oh, they are children. We can engage with them. Just like these stories I've shared with you. Alexandra's parents could have told her what to do with the money, but they allowed her to learn how to listen to the voice of the Lord. So we can engage with them. We can listen to them, like the little boy who felt he was called to China. Some of us, and this is very typical of us as Africans, we will shut that boy up and say, "What do you know?" But his parents listened to him. We can listen to our children. I'll give you another story. We ran a workshop, a training, in a slum in Lagos a few years ago. And part of the training was that we sent out listening groups. So they went out to listen to the children in that community. And the responses of those children were amazing and instructive. There was a question: if you could change one big thing in your community or in the world, what would that be? Listen to some of the responses of the children. We will fight corruption. We will change the dirty environment to a clean and peaceful one. We will stop our parents from fighting. Now imagine if the church in their community knew this and worked with these children by envisioning and empowering their families. Imagine the hope there is for Ghana, for Nigeria, for Africa, when children are reached and become part of the transformation team. We should seek to work with families to raise children who are agents of transformation. Young people have a special connection with children because not so long ago, they were children themselves. So they're able to connect easily, and the children look to them as their heroes or sheroes and role models. We want children to understand that the God they serve has an agenda that includes them. And in conclusion, Romans chapter 8 verse 19 says, "For creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God." I want to encourage you all to think smaller, to aim lower. Many times, we're always thinking of the adults. We're always, when we plan our missions programs, even this program, the children's track is run as a track, not as a plenary. I want to encourage you to think smaller, aim lower. How can we work with these children? How can we influence these children? How can we empower these children? not just as targets of missions, but also as partners of missions. Do not stop the young children from being part of God's team, for of such is the kingdom of heaven. God will use our children, and He's using them in His big story. Thank you very much. God bless you.